Some scenes may not be appropriate for younger audiences. Parental discretion is advised.
Hello, I'm Kimber Bennis, and welcome back to my channel. In my last video, we discussed some of the most interesting murder cases of the 1920s, and today we're going to continue that. So without further ado, here are some more famous cases from a century ago. New Orleans was as lively as ever during the 1920s. The streets were filled with music and flappers, just as one would imagine. But in October of 1927, the city was shaken as the bodies of two women were found dismembered and stuffed in trunks. The victims were Teresa and Lonnie Moody, two local women who were married to a set of brothers. They shared a home with their husbands, Henry and Joseph, as well as Teresa and Henry's three children on Ursuline Avenue. Although the couple were of modest means, they were able to afford a cleaning lady, and she would be the person unfortunate enough to stumble across a gruesome murder scene. George William Healy, a reporter who was tipped off, also witnessed the scene and would later describe it in his memoirs like this.
We found red stains on the floor and saw the large trunk in the bedroom partially open. When I pulled up the trunk lid, a woman's body, arms, and legs severed from the torso were exposed.
People at the scene also found 4 severed fingers in a bed before noticing a second trunk containing the remains of the other victim. The fingers belonged to Teresa, and although she was missing her wedding band, it wasn't stolen. They would find it later, lodged into a gaping wound on her back. Henry Moody was suspiciously missing and became an instant suspect. He had formerly worked as a butcher, and there were rumors that his wife may have been unfaithful in the past. After quite a large manhunt, he was eventually tracked down in the bayou. He initially claimed that the murders were the work of a ginger-haired Norwegian seafarer whom he had assisted in the gruesome act, but he quickly backtracked on this story, making a full confession on November 1st. Henry would later divulge more details about the murders and reveal that his motive was jealousy. He said that his wife had been having an affair with a man named Joseph Caruso, who operated a business on the lower floor of the building that they lived in. He admitted that Teresa and Lonnie had expressed interest in moving out of the home they shared together, which set him off into a rage. He also stated that she had waved a $10 bill in his face and bragged that she could make more in an hour as a prostitute than he could make in a week. On the night of the murders, he came home to the women packing their bags. He began drinking heavily and left the home to purchase the murder weapon, a large knife. He then killed them both and stuffed them in the trunks that they had been packing for their impending move. He was convicted in March 1928 and received a life sentence. Edward J. Adams went on one of the most infamous killing sprees of the decade. In 1920, he teamed up with criminal brothers Ray and Walter Majors and attempted an armed robbery on a well-known gambling den in broad daylight. Unfortunately for them, the employees were also armed, and a shootout began. With so many shots being fired, someone was sure to get hurt, and 2 men did in fact die in the incident. The robbers were apprehended by the police, and Adams was given a life sentence, but he didn't stay in prison long. While being transported to the Missouri State Penitentiary, he jumped off the train. He soon returned to his criminal ways. This time he partnered up with a man named Julius Finney, and the pair robbed a bank and general store near Garden Plain, Kansas. Adams stole a car and was once again captured by police after crashing it. This time he received a sentence of 10 to 30 years in Kansas, on top of the life sentence in Missouri. In August 1921, Adams escaped the law once again by sabotaging a prison power plant and climbing the walls. Fellow prisoners Frank Foster, George Weisberger, and D.C. Brown also escaped, and with the exception of D.C. Brown, the group of men would go on to form the Adams Gang with the getaway driver, Billy Fintelman. The gang began robbing banks in Kansas, and by September that year, they had taken over $10,000. In one of the robberies, Adams decided to pistol whip an 82-year-old man named James Crivel, fracturing his skull, leading to his eventual death. In October of the same year, several attempts were made by police to apprehend the violent gang. In one notable attempt, a farmer named C.J. Jones contacted Murray Sheriff Ed West after noticing the gang's vehicle on a nearby gravel road. A plan was made to investigate. As he approached the car, Sheriff West was surprised to find himself with a gun pointed directly at his face. They pulled the trigger, but the sheriff got lucky when the gun failed to fire. He did manage to take cover, and a brutal shootout followed, where many members of the gang were injured. The farmer, who was within earshot, heard the gunshots and grabbed his weapon, intending to aid the sheriff. Unfortunately, he ran into the posse who were fleeing the scene. Shots were fired, and Jones was left dead. After this, the gang traveled to Muscatatuck, Kansas, where they robbed 11 more stores. They also robbed 2 officers, abducted them, and set their motorcycles on fire. In November, Adams shot and killed another officer named Al Young. His supposed motive in this crime was a mutual love interest. They then followed this up with their most successful robbery, when they stole $35,000 from a Santa Fe Express train that was passing through Ottawa, Kansas. On November 20th, 1921, several members of the gang, along with some bootleggers and prostitutes, were out for a joyride. 2 officers pulled over the group, who were driving at very fast speeds. Someone in the gang, either Foster or Adams, fired on the lawman, killing Officer Robert Fitzpatrick, and made a quick getaway. They drove until they ran out of gas. They found themselves in need of a vehicle and tried to take one from a farmer they came across named George Oldham. When Oldham refused and put up a fight, he was shot and killed by Adams, and he and Foster took the car and continued their escape. The men attempted to meet up with McFarlane, another member of the gang, but when they got to his house, they were instead met by 2 police officers. He shot and injured one of the cops and was once again able to get away. He hid out for a couple of days, waiting for the slain Officer Fitzpatrick's funeral. He assumed that most of the police force would be attending the funeral, giving him ample time to make a stealthy exit. But unfortunately for him, the man he tried to rent a car from recognized him and tipped off the police. 3 officers arrived at the scene. Adams shot 2 of the men, Charles Bowman and Charles Hoffman, killing the latter. The 3rd officer, D.C. Stuckey, was able to hide behind a pillar and landed 3 shots on Adams, taking his life and stopping his crime spree. Mary Frances Creighton, also known as the Borgia, was an unusual case. She moved in with her husband's family as a newlywed, but things were tense with his parents, particularly her mother-in-law, Anna Creighton, who she was forced to spend a lot of time with due to the fact that they were both housewives at the time. After a while, Mary's brother Ray Avery was forced to move into the already tense situation, but he didn't stay there very long. Ray fell ill and soon passed away, leaving Mary as his beneficiary. After this, people around Mary began to drop like flies, starting out with her critical mother-in-law Anna, then her father-in-law Walter, then shortly after that, her brother-in-law Raymond Creighton also fell victim to a mysterious illness and died. Obviously, this started to draw attention of law enforcement, and both Mary and her husband John were arrested. Tests done on their fallen family members confirmed that they had all died due to arsenic poisoning. Mary went on trial for the murders and actually managed to beat the charges not once, but twice. Many people believe that this was due to the fact that the jury did not want to convict Mary because she was visibly pregnant at the time. After the trials, the Creightons moved to a new city, but times were rough, and several years later they were forced to take in another family, the Applegates, to help pay the bills. There are conflicting accounts of what happened next, ranging from Mary having an affair with Everett Applegate, the father of the family, to him potentially molesting Mary's young daughter Ruth. But no matter which story is the truth, they all end the same way. Everett's wife Ava became ill and succumbed to what the doctors initially thought was pneumonia. Unfortunately for Mary, a neighbor was familiar with her past and alerted authorities. Ava's body was tested and it was confirmed that she too had died as a result of arsenic poisoning. Mary and Everett both stood trial for the death of Ava Applegate, and both were convicted and received the death penalty. Their appeals were denied. Strangely, Mary may have poisoned herself in the process of murdering others. She too became ill in prison, eventually losing mobility. On the day of her execution, she had to be taken in by wheelchair. Her unconscious body was lifted onto the electric chair, where she was shocked until she died. Everett followed immediately after. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. If you want to support us, in the description there will be a link for our Patreon, as well as the link for the first episode, part 1 of this series. I know it's taken me a while to put out a new video. Everything's been crazy with the quarantine, but I am hoping to get back on track soon, and I'm planning to do an Art Imitates Life about Jeffrey Dahmer. Thank you so much as always, guys, and stay safe.